Today's Inspired House discussion is a library episode as we talk with psychologist and author Dr. Jalisa Barnes. Recent children's book author Dr. Jalisa Barnes stops by and gets real with us about the importance of mental health. As a seasoned psychologist, Dr. Jalisa Barnes is a wealth of information, and she's not holding back. You're in for a good discussion.
Everything doesn't have to go from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds, right? So you meet somebody, you like them, right? See who they are. Are they consistent with the things that they say and what they do, right? Do they line up? What are their values? What do they care about? I found, though, that I did not find a lot of literature on depression that was written for kids in a child's voice. I looked. I really wasn't satisfied with what was out there. And so I wrote the story in a couple hours. It sounds very cliche, but it is so important not to.
Hey, welcome home, family. I want to thank you again for tuning in to another episode of The Inspired House. As always, I'm your host, Desmond Davis, and y'all, I got family in the building today, y'all. I am so excited to get into this conversation of mental mastery with one of the most brilliant minds that I know, and a mind I get to call a big sister, Dr. Jalisa A. Barnes. How you doing, sis?
What's going on? Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming through. I am so excited to just be able to just introduce you to my audience, and just the questions we get about mental health and things like that, and with just following the work that you've done and following the career that you've had so far and what you do just as just a dynamic woman and as a woman of color. I think you're just the best person to have this conversation with. And so
Thank you.
just real quick, I would love to just hand it over to you to let the people know who you are.
Okay, so my name is Jalisa Barnes, and I have a doctorate in psychology from Alfred University, which is consequently where I met my little brother. I am from Brooklyn, New York, born and raised, and once I finished all my schooling and everything associated, I moved back home, so that's where I'm stationed. I have a background in school psychology, so I was a school psychologist for the New York City Department of Education for 5 years before resigning to focus on private practice and clinical work. So currently I work for the CBT and Wellness Center in Long Island, New York, Merrick, those of you who know it. And I'm also part-time in a preschool as a school psychologist for a school with children who have special needs, and it's called the Guild for Exceptional Children. I've also written a book called Sometimes I'm Sad, and it's actually a children's book, and it's geared toward young children who experience depressive symptoms for prolonged periods of time. So it never explicitly states in the book that she has depression, but she struggles with prolonged sadness until she gets some help. I don't know what else you want to know. I love Jesus. So I'm actually the youth minister at my church, Salvation and Restoration Church of God in Christ in Brooklyn, New York. And, I love my kids, my young people. What else? I got a big family. I love my family. I don't know what else you want to know. Y'all want to know my blood type? B. Say when.
I don't even you caught me off guard. Almost made me choke on my water. So sis, you with being with getting your doctorate and working with young people and doing the work of mental health, writing a book and being a mental health provider of color, right? Being a Black mental health professional. I would just love to know, I know you kind of didn't, come out the womb being Dr. Jalisa Barnes. And so what has that journey looked like for you?
Long and what's that word? Turbulent. Yes, that's the good word. Well, actually, I thought I was going to be a teacher. So both my parents are educators, actually, and they're both now retired. And so I don't know. I just always imagined myself being a teacher. So I started to, and I guess I should say I went to an HBCU for undergrad, Claflin University, which is located in Orangeburg, South Carolina. Um, so I went away, and my initial major was in early childhood education, and I thought I was going to be a teacher of young kids. And I went through some of the coursework, and I actually worked in a daycare for a couple of summers between, my school years. And I realized I did not want to be in a classroom. I just didn't want that. That life was not for me. And so my junior year in college, I just found myself wondering what next, because I really don't know what I want to do. And so I came across school psychology, and it seemed to be a nice mix of things that I was interested in. So I was still interested in education. I just didn't want to be a teacher. I've always been interested in things like history and the human psyche. And so a lot of the skills that would be needed to do like research and, almost like investigative work, detective type work, it just seemed like a nice combination of all the things I was interested in. And so I applied for programs. I got into Alfred. I got on the doctorate track, and here I am. And as my education continued and as my experiences continued, I became more and more interested in actual clinical psychotherapy. And so while I still have a love for school psychology, I do tend to enjoy counseling and therapy and really kind of helping people get to the root of their issues, and find better ways to live their lives.
Hmm. Thank you for kind of explaining that and kind of bringing us along the journey with that. So when did like what clicked when you realized that you had a passion for helping people in that mental, social, emotional kind of space of navigating that? And how, like, what I know you said it was not being in the classroom and getting up out of there. You're like, ah, that's not my thing. But how? But what was it? What clicked for you that that, like, oh, helping people navigate this space within mental health is kind of where I'm at. How did you know?
Well, during your grad school training at Alfred, there is actually a clinic attached to the campus, attached to the school. And so we had to, as part of our coursework, we actually had to practice being therapists. And so that was, again, just through that experience, I don't know that there was any one aha moment, but I just found myself very comfortable in it. It came pretty natural to me. And we did have actual patients. Usually these were low income people who, needed services but couldn't go to a place and pay for it, or insurance wouldn't cover it. So we were helping people under supervision, helping people work through real issues. And so it was very satisfying to see that you could actually help people, and their lives would be different as a result of working with you. So I don't have like one moment that I could pinpoint, but I just know that through that experience, I knew that that was something I wanted to do more, or wanted to continue to do throughout my career.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That okay. So you kind of just had like a almost like a journey of, okay, I'm noticing something, and then it
Mm-hmm.
kind of consistently gets reaffirmed and confirmed time and time again.
Mm-hmm.
With the people that you worked with, how many of them in that part of your life in the college space, even though you went to a PWI, how many of those folk like looked like us? When I think about kind of the college space and people of color and our social thoughts regarding mental health,
Mm-hmm.
how did that look like?
None of them look like us. They looked
None.
like the community in that area. And Alfred is rural, upstate, very white, typically, except for people who actually are on campus as students. Very rarely do you see non-whites in that area, in that community, that just live there and choose to live there. I mean, obviously, there are a few exceptions. But yeah, the people that came to the clinic were not people of color.
Wow.
You see me?
Do did once you got home, I'm assuming that changed. Um, but I guess my follow up would be, do is based off of what you've observed,
Mm-hmm.
has there been an influx or has there been an increase of maybe receptiveness to
Mm-hmm.
discussions about mental health, to mental health care
Oh,
within the black
yeah,
community that you've noticed?
for sure. I think a lot of people want help, particularly in the Black community. Yes, there's still a stigma. There are still less people of, well, I'll say Black because that's where my primary focus has been. There are still Black people who don't believe in therapy or don't accept the benefits of therapy, but there are a lot of people who really want therapy, but maybe can't afford it or don't have access to it one way or another. So right now, I have a pretty healthy mix. I have Black people, white people, Latinx people. Yeah, I think for me at that point, it was just the location,
Hmm.
But
Fire,
now, like I
fire.
said, I'm
Okay.
back home. And, my people look like the community.
Hmm. Okay, I appreciate that, and so you're seeing a good representation
That's
of
it.
that community. You said something that I wanted to ask, really, kind of for my audience.
Sure.
What's the difference between therapy and counseling?
So, therapy is actually treatment. Counseling counseling is treatment, but it's usually on a more kind of surface scale. It's usually applied to people who may have like minor things that they want to address, or maybe there's like one specific thing that they want to work on. So when you think of getting counsel, right, it's almost like consultation, right? So you're there to consult and work. You're still getting techniques and strategies that are evidence based, that should be evidence based and research proven, but it's not usually as extensive or intense as therapy or psychotherapy. So psychotherapy is actually treatment. You go to a therapist, a psychologist. You actually do an intake, or a social worker. You do an intake. You get a diagnosis. They may share it, they may not. You get a diagnosis, and then they develop a treatment plan for you, and then they move through the treatment plan and they track and monitor your progress. Counselors do that as well. They do the monitoring of progress. But I would say the approach is a bit more in depth. It's a
Mm,
bit more in depth and a bit more scientific.
okay.
Mhm.
Would it be an accurate comparison of looking at maybe using one of the phrases I heard? I can't think of who said it to give them credit, but they used the phrase mental hygiene,
Mhm.
and it's this idea of maybe like counseling, with it being surface level, is like kind of the initial piece, but then maybe therapy is kind of that deeper
Mhm.
um piece. In that, is that, would that kind of, am I understanding it correctly?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. You could say counseling is more. I would say like, let's say you're pretty okay with people, you're pretty okay socially, but let's say you struggle with conflict resolution and you just want some support and some tools in developing healthy ways to resolve conflicts with people. That's more of like a counseling thing, right? Or people who have think of people who have like substance use issues, right? They go to substance use counseling. They might go to psychotherapy to
Mhm.
deal with the underlying issues that might lead them. And so it might be incorporated, right? So they might see one person who's doing both, right? But when they see a counselor for that particular thing, they're working specifically on that area, if that makes sense.
Mm, that makes a lot of sense. That
Mm-hmm.
makes a lot of sense. Okay. So
Yeah.
kind of it's more focused in on a particular thing in terms of that treatment. And
Mm-hmm.
so, okay, I excuse me. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate kind of that differentiation for
Mm-hmm.
our audience. So with what you're doing now
Mm-hmm.
in the mental health space, as a professional, as a therapist, I guess, what, if there would be a generational trend, if you would,
Mm-hmm.
what would be something that maybe you've noticed in this generation, not as much Generation Z, but just in general in terms of when you're kind of working with clients and working with patients, are there more like themes that you notice, or is it kind of differentiated?
Ah, so you're basically saying, are there differences in age groups in terms of things they need, or?
I think what I'm trying to ask
Uh-huh.
is, are there like consistent themes that you're seeing now in your professional journey? Even though I know everybody's different, but are there like, oh, I'm seeing more cases of this, and kind of just wanted
Okay.
to know from your perspective.
I definitely, most of my clients are on the younger side, so I'd say 40 and under. So that older generation still has difficulty with therapy, I think, as a whole, on average. Um, it's similar issues, but just maybe manifested in different ways because depending on, where you are in life and what's going on with you. And some people that I work with have, mental illnesses associated with psychosis, like bipolar disorder, OCD. And then you have others that might just have some anxiety, some depression. Um, I don't know if I'd say themes, or related to their age or their generation. I get a nice, like I said, I get a nice healthy mix. I do notice that I get a lot of parents who struggle with identifying healthy balances for their kids. So I will say that. So I get a lot of teenagers and parents who maybe the parents were raised very, strictly and had a lot of rules. And so the way they're raising their kids is very different. And so I do see a lot of teenagers who tend to be very unhappy because their parents don't have a lot of structure or boundaries or instruction for them. And then they have this overexposure to media, to social media, and just information that they're really not built to handle yet, or maybe even at all, because we all get overstimulated by social media if we engage too much. And so it creates very difficult dynamics for them to manage. So that is something that I see pretty often. And I haven't done enough research to tell how much of that is generational, but I do think some of it is unique to this generation. There are things that, parents of 80s and 90s kids didn't really have to think about or worry about when raising us, but these parents of these kids, there are a lot of things that they have to kind of protect them from, or facilitate or guide them through. And it does seem like there's just too much to keep up sometimes.
Okay. I appreciate you kind of breaking that down. I guess my follow up would be, for that older generation that would
But
say like, well, hey, we went through stuff, and we're not experiencing all these things, or we don't have all these diagnoses. And now this new generation, it's like they seem to have something, right? These are the things that like I hear like an internship and stuff,
uh-huh.
and it'll be like, if you look for something, it'll be there, and if you just kind of put your head down and just get through what you got to get through, and suck
Uh-huh.
it up, right?
Uh-huh.
Like, have you run into those kind of cases or those kind of responses before?
But the more resistant?
Yeah.
Yes. Not as often because we are a private practice, so most of the people who are there by choice. But I might have somebody who's there because their parents said they had to be there. Um, and that's why for counselors and therapists, building a rapport is really important. Trying to find something to connect with that person on, and they may not be willing to work on anything right away or wanting to work on anything right away. But you want to be able to at least just create a safe space for them, that should you come to a place where, and most of them will, like once they recognize that this is a safe place, this is a place that I can just do what I need to do, we do eventually get to a place where we can do work. But there's still a lot of mistrust, and there's still a lot of just misinformation, honestly. And that's one thing that I think a lot of therapists find issue with, is that's another thing. People are just constantly self-diagnosing, self-treating, And so you have people who feel like also I don't need it because I have all the information I need. And it's like, no, you don't. And there's information and then there's training. So you can have information, but if it's misapplied, it doesn't matter. But again, I really don't come across older people because again, especially once they're adults, usually the people that I come across are there because they want to be there. So if somebody doesn't want to be there, then chances are they won't end up in my office.
Okay, I like that then. So you kind of know how to navigate that resistance if need be, but you're in a situation where you're working with the people for the most part who want to be there. And I think whether you're coaching, whether you're counseling, conducting therapy, whatever, having folks who want to be there, I think just helps with way more promising results. So you mentioned that you wrote a book,
I did.
and I wanted to spend some time on that if I could. What to really hear more about what really inspired you to write that book.
So again, the book is called Sometimes I'm Sad. I have it somewhere. I don't know. It's somewhere. I have to clean up my office. Anyway, it's called Sometimes I'm Sad, and it is about a little girl who is struggling with depressed feelings. Nah, that's crazy. I literally just had this thing like 2 days ago. All right. And it's going to bother me till I find it. But I'm going to keep talking. So I actually wrote it during COVID because I was working with children online. And I use books to build and maintain rapport with them. And I like books that focus on, obviously, that focus on things that they deal with because I noticed that with children, it's a bit easier for them to talk about things when they can talk about it through another person. So if a child is dealing with anxiety and we read a book, they may not be able to talk about their own anxiety right away. But if we read a book about another person who exhibits some of the symptoms and characteristics that they have, we can talk about that person. And then as they get, more comfortable talking about that person or dealing with that person, then we kind of sort of slide on over to let's talk about you now. So it's been a really good technique. Bibliotherapy is actually really well researched and well used. And so I found though that I did not find a lot of literature on depression that was written for kids in a child's voice. And so I looked. I really wasn't satisfied with what was out there. And so I wrote the story in a couple of hours. And then it took a couple of years to get it published, but there I am.
Wow. So it sounds like you kind of, I think that's really interesting then, just from the work that you do, you saw a need and you responded with that need by providing the solution. And I think that's really kind of powerful. So so then I guess, there we go. There we go. And that is on Amazon, correct? Is it on any other places besides Amazon? Just for clarity.
Amazon is pretty much it right now. It's on digital and it's in paperback, and you can DM me on the socials if you want a hard copy, a hardcover. I can make those. I can get those special ordered.
Can they be signed?
They can. It'll just take longer.
Okay,
but they can.
Okay, so special edition, signed by Dr. Barnes herself, for an additional $20. Anyway, so then, real quick, so I think that's really interesting, just the way you go about finding and creating the solution, creating the tools that you need to do the work that you do. When we're considering your audience, the people who are usually 40 years and younger, I know in most times that's primarily children, but that also is young adults. Young adults who might be transitioning from the college space into the workspace, and just would love to hear maybe from you, are there any, if you had to think of just some helpful tools or some things that young adults can do to manage their own mental health, maybe if they're feeling anxiety, maybe if they're wrestling with depression, maybe they're dealing with the stressors of being in a new job or
Mhm.
moving, what would be some things that some gems you'd give to, let's say, like new or first time employees?
Um, it sounds very cliche, but it is so important not to rush your process. I feel like I wasted so much time trying to make everything happen now, not asking for help, not kind of being patient enough to gather all the information that I needed, whether it's starting a new job, whether it's moving somewhere. There were just a lot of times when I feel like I kind of made mistakes that maybe didn't really need to be made if I had just slowed myself down a little bit. So, again, we live in an age where it seems like everything is supposed to happen instantly, and that's just not how life works. So, especially when you're, again, first starting out, you need a new job, you're trying to build, whether it's relationships, just build your life, you know, stand in the things that stand in the things that you have been taught, right? And gather the information that you need before you jump into something, you know, brand new or different. And if you do happen to make a mistake, you can turn it around as well. It's not the end of the world. So you got to find a healthy balance. I guess I'll say that. Find a healthy balance between taking risks, but also being as informed as you possibly can, and gathering the tools that you need. So don't always leap before you look, but you don't always. I don't know. Your life won't be over if you do happen to. What is it? It's look before you leap, but don't. Your life's not over if you leap before you look. I don't know if that makes sense.
Okay, okay, I like that. I'm gonna steal that.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna steal that. And it sounds like one of the things I talk with my clients and stuff is this idea of work life rhythm
Mhm.
and kind of going through the process of figuring out what your rhythm is,
Mhm.
figuring out what your tempo is, what part of the song that you're in,
Mhm.
and I think if I can summarize, if I'm hearing you correctly, not being afraid to take chances, but
Mhm.
maybe taking more calculated chances and calculated risks.
I like it. You succinct. Forgive me,
Is
y'all. I've
that
been at
okay?
work, and I went to
You're
the gym
good.
before work. My brain is gone.
You're good. You're good. You're good. I think this is dope though because I like how you're kind of giving us the inside scoop of how you see and how you think through things, and I think that's
Mhm.
fire. So, real quick, with the time that we kind of have left,
Mhm.
I have a personal question. So right
Sure.
now I'm finishing up my master's in social work.
Mhm.
And right now we're in a class, and it's about mental health recovery
Mhm.
and this topic of mental health recovery and can people recover from from mental health related issues and stuff and looking at things like the recovery model and stuff like that. And so I would love to hear from your perspective and from your training or your experience, where are you at in terms of the idea of mental health recovery? If somebody's gone through a traumatic thing, if somebody has gone through something that is now affecting their mental health,
Mhm.
is that something from your perspective, is that something that someone can actually bounce back and recover from?
I think you can recover. I don't know if you can bounce back. And again, I think that kind of ties into what we talked about a few minutes ago, giving yourself time. As somebody, and I'll even take off the therapist hat, just somebody who's been through trauma and various traumas at various times in life. One of the things I was always trying to do was bounce back, get back to equilibrium. And as I've gotten older, that bounce gets slower and slower. And so it's, I'm actually kind of in a recovery right now, and one thing that I'm continuing to learn and I continue to kind of push with my clients is again, that gathering information. I have to gather information about myself. How has this situation changed me? Right? Because most traumas change you in some way, right? The first thing it takes away is your sense of identity. One of the first things it takes away is your sense of identity because you're no longer the person that you were before that trauma occurred, especially if it's something that's very, severe, life changing, right? So you have to get to know the person that you are now that this trauma has passed, number one. And then you have to heal from the wounds that the trauma has caused. And some
Hmm.
people will carry scars for the rest of their lives, but that doesn't mean that they have to have these open wounds just gaping. And if you try to just jump back into the fray, right? Think of like an actual wound, right? If you have an actual cut, you don't disinfect it, you don't protect it, you don't cover it. What's going to happen is going to keep rubbing up against that wound and it's going to stay open or it's going to take longer to heal.
Yeah.
So the recovery is possible. What I think people have to learn how to do though is sit with themselves as they recover, allow themselves the space to feel what they feel, go through what they, need to go through mentally and emotionally. If they need support, getting the support that they need and allowing people to support them as they go through. And just not expecting the you from before. If you get back there, that's great. But if not, you can still be a full and healthy person with this experience that now has marked a significant change in your life.
Wow. I guess I've never considered it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And when you first started, you said recovery, yes. Bounce back, no. I don't know about that. And I think that's really good because
Mm-hmm.
it exposes, I think, a lot of our language,
Mm-hmm.
especially in a busy society of, oh, we got to be able to bounce back.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you got to be able to snap back. I think in sports, how the whoever can recover, like we applaud athletes who can
Walk it off.
recover quicker. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh wow, they tore their
Mm-hmm.
ACL and they were back in less than eight
Yep.
months,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's interesting kind of hearing that language be exposed in a way
Mm-hmm.
of recovery versus bouncing back,
Mm-hmm.
and I appreciate that, and I hope our audience, I hope you're listening, and kind of seeing some of that language. My last question, if I have time, is that okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you
Okay.
got you got 13 minutes. You good. You
Okay.
just moving along.
Was there even a watch on there? You just looking at your wrist? Was there even a watch there?
Ta-da.
Okay, okay. It was so low. It was like because you looked convincingly, but I'm like, they didn't even know.
Don't do me. Don't do me.
So what are some I wanted to jump to this because of your expertise and a lot of the conversations I've seen you lead. For those who don't know, right, when I was in college, I was a part of the gospel choir, and Jaleesa was our fearless director who
Oh
got
my
us all
God.
together and was also kind of serving as big sister and just giving us a lot of helpful big sister advice.
Uh,
I'm not going to say counseling or therapy because I ain't trying to risk nobody's licensure and stuff. But
I ain't
right,
have one then, so.
hey, it is what it is then. But just was just holding it down and helping us. And I know one of the things we talked about as groups was relationships,
Oh,
and I would love if time would allow to maybe hop into that discussion a little bit. What do you think?
okay. Sure.
Okay, dope. So for a lot of my audience, a lot of them, they're trying to figure out and properly navigate how to do relationships
Uh-huh.
well, how
Uh-huh.
to be successful, how to hit their goals and their dreams, just how to have more fulfillment.
Uh-huh.
And relationships always seems to be a big part of that.
Uh-huh.
And I wanted to just kind of bounce it to you on what would you say are some signs that maybe from a professional, a mental health professional standpoint, that
Uh-huh.
might be some red flags in terms of relationships, that maybe some things you should look out for.
Um, wow, that's a lot. We might not have the 13 minutes that we can, well, it's 10 now. Uh,
Follow up conversation is what I'm hearing.
this
Okay.
this may take a longer. But in general, again, that giving yourself time piece, you have to give yourself time to see a person's character, right? Again, everything doesn't have to go from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds, right? So you meet somebody, you like them, right? See who they are. Are they consistent with the things that they say and what they do? right? Do they line up? What are their values? What do they care about? Do those values align with yours, right? So first and foremost, if you're misaligned, you can have fun. And one thing I really will advocate for is having fun, especially if you have a lot of things that you're trying to accomplish at a time. Have fun. Go on dates, hang out, get to know people. Don't OD, but get to know people, spend time with people, and have fun. And if it's not fun anymore, I am a believer that it's okay to move on. Especially again, if you have things that you're pursuing, things that you're focusing on, you don't have to put all your eggs into one basket. And I know that that's something that younger people tend to do because you feel things like super intensely and you're like, this is it. And this may be it. That doesn't mean it has to be it right this second, if that makes sense. The other side of that. So red flags, obviously, if a person is dishonest with you for whatever reason, you know, ghosting is still a big thing and getting bigger. If they're dropping in and out of your life, they're not prioritizing you. And that's okay. That's okay. It's information. One thing that I tell my patients a lot is whatever is not working for you is information for what to do the next time. So you meet somebody, they don't turn out to be, what you want or what you need or what you're looking for. That's cool. That's just information for you the next time you try. So it's not a failure. It's not a, deficit or shortcoming on your part. It's nobody's fault, or it doesn't have to be anybody's fault. Didn't work out, fine. What can I take from that and move on to the next thing? So lying is a red flag. Inconsistency is a red flag. Um, People who, I got a thing about dreamers. It's great to have a dream, but if the dream doesn't have any action behind it, then it's just your imagination. So somebody got goals. You got what's your motion behind the goals? You know what I'm saying? Okay, you want to be a business person. What are you doing? Do you have a plan? Are you taking business classes? Did you work with somebody and work out your financials, right? Falling in love with potential is again real fun to think about. It's not that fun to live. So for my younger people, those 18 to like 25, have fun. Have fun. Gather your information. Dating is not going anywhere, despite what media tries to tell you. It's not going anywhere. So if it's not working, it doesn't align, it's not fun for you, and you have other things to focus on, handle your business. I don't know if that answered your question.
That did. That did. I think you exposed the red flags while also exposing the green flags of what we need to pursue. And I can't think of a better way of kind of closing out this conversation. Real quick, just for our audience, so that they, in case they missed it at the beginning, how can they connect with you? How can they follow what you're doing and all of that?
All right. So first things first, you can find me on YouTube under Dr. period Jaleesa, Jalasa Barnes, Barnes. You can also find me on Instagram, pretty much the same name and spelling, just all one word, Dr. Jalasa Barnes. Same thing on TikTok. I'm still building up TikTok, so go to Instagram first. What else? Yeah, those are pretty much the three main platforms that I tend to be on. Yeah.
Awesome.
And
well,
yeah,
hey,
if you have questions, you can DM me.
I love it. I love it, sis. I just gleaned a lot. I just definitely learned a lot. I'm definitely going to be stealing some of the stuff you said when I'm talking with my clients. But I just want to thank our audience for coming and hanging out at the Inspired House. As always, y'all, please stay inspired. Please focus and work on every room of your house when you can, to the best of your abilities. But the most important thing to keep in mind is you have to manage you. You heard it. You heard it here from Dr. Jaleesa herself, right? You have to be able to manage you. And so we believe in you. Stay inspired. Thank you so much for hanging out, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.